Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
UConn pulled the Drake and went back-to-back. How did they do it without a roster loaded with future NBA players? Also, with the tournament over, how does it stack up to years past? And the best candidate to replace John Calipari is obvious. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Connecticut Huskies have gone back-to-back. Zak Eddy put up 37 and 10, but the UConn Huskies controlled everyone else in a 75-60 game that they felt in control of, really wire to wire. Mark Zanetto from Locked On UConn joins me now. And Mark, we've been talking about this team all through the tournament and the ruthless efficiency that they play with on both ends is absolutely unbelievable. If I had told you before the game, though, that Zak Eddy was going to have 37 and 10, would you believe that they would come out of this with what ends up being a comfortable win?
Absolutely. It's exactly what I talked about this morning. I taped around 10 a.m. And said, I was joking, but I said, let Zak Eddy go for 50 for all we care, as long as you don't couple it with Braden Smith goes for 15, Mason Gillis comes off the bench for 20, or any of the others, as kind of what it's been happening, whether it's been Caitlin Clark and the others or Zak Eddy and the others. Mm-hmm. Total teams, and you saw it with South Carolina, when you only have that one guy that you can kind of just say, okay, they're going to do their thing. But this UConn team really showed a lot of discipline and relentlessness, is what you mentioned, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, the similarities were sort of jumping off the screen as I was watching between South Carolina and UConn, South Carolina on the ladies' side, because they just, every possession, both ends, you can't make mistakes against this team. And what's remarkable to me, Mark, is to go back to back in an era with the transfer portal and one and dones and all of the talent that's in the game on the men's and women's side. What do you think deserves the biggest share of that credit pie?
Yeah, I think you could dice it up a little bit. I think, and this is to no fault of your own, Peter, it's, the UConn's been discredited a lot this year, and this is me, Dan Hurley versus the world. I've been Hurley-fied, you know what I mean? Like, we're everything that is said against us is some kind of slight. But I will say that I think, whether it's Steph Castle, I have a great little story about Cam Spencer. I'll keep it short, where a friend of mine who works with him, off the field, he said, you'll probably play in Europe. And he looked at him and said, I can't say what he said on the air, but he looked at him and said, don't ever say that to me again. There are guys in this team that have the chip on their shoulder, the size of a boulder. And you saw it tonight. Cam Spencer is 6'4". I think he had 12 rebounds. I mean, listen, this team, Steph Castle is going to be an NBA player. It may not be the Zion Williamson that everyone wants, but this collective effort, this amount of team that is so connected and locked in is really impressive. And it really started a couple years back when they lost in the NCAA tournament. Couple of quick exits out. They realized they needed to change their offense. And so I would say 60% on this team and this coaching staff, which is pretty old school, to kind of lean towards a more efficient, modern offense. But it's also the recruiting. They have what they call old souls, guys who probably, you and I are on the same age. These guys grew up in a different era. And they're searching for those players, not just talent. They're searching for those players to stay connected.
Does it change the way you have to recruit or can recruit? Like, because presumably you're going to get those guys too.
Yeah, I hear your point. I think it may change. I think it may change the way coaches look at. We might need to work on our offense. If you watch,
maybe some other teams need to recruit a little differently. Is the point?
Yeah, I think that's the bigger, the overarching theme is. Just like the NFL, college basketball and coaches steal from everything. It's a copycat league. So you're going to see teams go, let's watch UConn. But then it's going to be like, do we have the type of players to kind of run this offense? Right. I'll give you one quick possession when when Alex Garrettman didn't make too many shots tonight, but he was, if you're a UConn fan, you love the way he played defensively, timely rebounds, tip outs. But the one time Kaufman-Renn left him to kind of check after a loose ball to kind of almost double and make a chance, he flared out to the baseline, hit a wide open three, put them up about 14, 15. It was kind of on their way on the ascension of them taking over this game. That's what is so great about UConn. When you make a mistake, they make you pay.
Going back to back in an era like this, how can you put into perspective an accomplishment like that, given this whole conversation about the kinds of guys that they've recruited and how Hurley has changed the culture here? Like how do you try and put this into perspective historically?
All I can do is I'm 42 years old. I'll be 43. When I was 9 years old, we made a run to the Elite Eight as the dream season, what it was called, right? And we lost to Duke at the buzzer. I just always thought as a kid, and then getting into, as they ascended, that we were always going to be good, but I never thought we'd ever be here. 6 titles, more than Duke. Yeah. Do something that Duke did, go back to back, tied with North Carolina, just behind Kentucky, where 3 of their titles are before the 60s. Just having this success in this era, it's hard to quantify, but we're here and we're going to enjoy it as UConn fans. It's the basketball capital of the world. I know the UConn women didn't win this year, but they've won enough. I think it's time for the men to reach the same status as the women and just to continue to kind of, make this climb up that mountain. So all the credit to Dan Hurley and his staff and these players, just a phenomenal team. And it's hard to put into perspective, but I'm going to enjoy this one even more than last year.
Stay up to date all year on the UConn Huskies by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On UConn on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, now that it's wrapped up, how does this year's tournament stack up with years past? Before we get to that, the NCAA is toying with the idea of changing up the transfer rules again. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. It's also one of the best weeks on the calendar, Masters Week. FanDuel has so much for you to make money on. One of the featured specials FanDuel has for you is 2 players finishing inside the top 10. Odds on Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy to make the top 10. 2-1. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you thought the transfer portal was wild before, it's about to get Daytona Beach spring break wild. The NCAA Division I Council could adopt emergency legislation this month for a new transfer rule that would allow all undergraduate athletes to transfer and play immediately if they meet specific academic requirements. This, according to a recent report. The proposed legislation would not limit the number of times an athlete can transfer. Athletes would still have 2 transfer windows and wouldn't be able to transfer mid-year and play for a second school in the same season. Sacramento Kings G League coach Lindsay Hardin has a chance to make history. The 2024 G League Coach of the Year will interview for the Charlotte Hornets head coaching job to potentially become the first female head coach in NBA history. The 39-year-old was the #1 overall pick in the 2007 WNBA draft and played 9 seasons in the league before joining the Philadelphia 76ers and Sacramento Kings as a developmental coach. On the diamond, the Braves had a chance in the bottom of the 9th to make a comeback against the Mets.
Unfortunately, they came up a run short in the opener of a 4-game set against the New York Mets by an 8-7 final score. it was the Mets who found the late runs they needed to grab a win over the Atlanta Braves to open up this series at Truist Park on a night in which the Braves were celebrating one of the legends of baseball, the 50th anniversary of Henry Aaron's 715th home run. The Braves weren't able to have those heroics pull out that victory and give Hank that one more win on a night in which I think all of the baseball world can appreciate.
And Elly De La Cruz decided to take over against the Brewers.
Elly De La Cruz called the game. What's up? This is Jeff Carr from the Locked On Reds podcast, and Elly De La Cruz had a 2-homer day in the most unconventional way. Absolutely beautiful day for him. He was on base 4 times, reached on an error the first time, but he was on base all day long. He had a monster smash that hits the batter's eye in center field, and whenever the game was on the ropes, whenever the Reds lead looked a little bit precarious, he hits an inside the park home run. Absolutely beautiful stuff from him. He's starting to heat up. I want to see more. Obviously, it's far too early in the season to say that we're satisfied, but big night from Elly De La Cruz, and the Reds start off the series with the Brewers in the best kind of way. Make sure you check out the Locked On Reds podcast for more.
We got the matchup we were expecting. 2 teams we know pretty well with established stars. And yet something felt a little lacking Monday night. Maybe it was the 9:20 Eastern start time. Maybe everyone's a little sleepy. I know Isaac Shade from Locked On College Basketball was not sleepy, but Isaac, did you feel, I saw a lot of mentions on social media from people who are like, you know, this kind of doesn't have the same juice that we got on Sunday night in the women's final.
Sunday night, that was Sunday afternoon. We got to get a little compromise here. Can we?
Yeah.
No,
right.
Peter, it didn't. And it's a story because of a storyline that you and I talked about earlier this college basketball season. Right now, what we have in the women's game is the names and the stars. And that's why that game on Sunday did a 18 point whatever number that it did, because you've got Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins and Angel Reese and Paige Beckers and on and on and on. And in the men's side, for me, who covers it all the time, there's a bunch of names and I love them, but they do not have right now the same level of household cachet that the women's does. And so I just think that's part of it. That's part of the luster of it. But you even think about the modernization of college basketball, Peter, of basketball in general, I guess I should say. This game, UConn Purdue combined, I'm looking at the numbers right now, shot a combined 7 of 29 from 3.
Yeah.
I think, there's just things like that play into it where it's just like, the highlight of this game was a putback dunk from a white dude that's 2 inches taller than me. Right? And so it's just like, I just don't think we get some of those moments where it's just like, oh, UConn's just doing what they're doing at a ridiculously unprecedented level because they're just a really stinking good basketball team. But it's nothing that we're like, oh boy, that was infectious. And I loved it Monday because I thought it was a great basketball game, but it's not what brings in Johnny Q basketball fan.
Yeah. And look, Connecticut was a death machine all season. Like they are just, and the phrase that I used was relentless. That's what they are on both ends. And that, for the product, that's not always the best thing. Let's flip this to talk about Purdue because Zak Eddy puts an exclamation point on his career, at least in the stat line. They come up short as a team, but just as we talked about the other day with Caitlin Clark, you win as a team. You do the individual, the scoring and the rebounding. That's what you do individually. How are you going to remember this period of Purdue basketball?
As a phenomenal period of Purdue basketball. Look, for me, they fell 16 points shy of pulling a Virginia, basically, right? Like Virginia, who lost UMBC 2018, came back to win the national championship. Purdue fell just shy of that. But I think, I know we're not here to get into a rings culture conversation, but we need to celebrate Final Fours, right? Like that needs to be a thing in the college game. And so for me, I'm going to remember Zak Eddy as the guy that got Matt Painter to the Final Four for the first time. I saw a quote from Zak Eddy from the post-game press conference from just a little bit ago. I've always said, quote, Matt Painter is someone who gave me a chance. I've been trying for 4 years to pay him back for that, end quote. And Peter, that's the thing for me, is that not only has he paid him back tenfold that, but college basketball has given everything to Zak Edey. And what a run and a ride it's been for this guy who becomes the first back-to-back National Player of the Year since some dude named Ralph freaking Sampson from Virginia way back when. And so I'm going to remember this era of Purdue basketball very well. Thank you very much. The question now is, can they find a way to prolong it and extend it in the same way that UConn is kind of building a programmatic identity right now?
Yeah, and it is all taking place in a changing landscape. These teams able to figure out how to make this work. I'm going to throw this at you because this was something that we talked about earlier in the show. Do you think other teams need to change the way that they handle recruiting, the way that they handle team composition? Because we just saw two teams that were built almost like NBA teams, where you go, we needed these role players, we need these shooters, we need these guys. And it seems like a lot of programs, at least the teams that can, are star hunting, and it has not led to, let's just think about Kentucky, John Calipari. Like, yep. This is the reverse of that. And it's sort of like, well, why isn't every team in college basketball outside of like 10 doing it this way?
Peter, one and done has been dead for years now. It's not just now that John Calipari is leaving tail between his legs, by the way, to run to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Yeah. Like, this has been a long time coming, and it's like John Calipari refuses to accept the reality of it. When, like this year, he finally accepted three-point shooting as like a viable strategy, and they became the number one three-point shooting team by percentage in the nation. And then he touts it as like some revolutionary thing that he figured out. And I'm like, Coach Cal, you're not a great X's and O's coach, and you've just now figured this out. Consequently, he's going to come live for me and make Tyson food money, right? Like, that's what we're talking about here.
Keep up with college basketball all year by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On College Basketball on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the top candidate to replace John Calipari is obvious. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guaranteed, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for baseball, basketball, football, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for big-time savings. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. For a limited time, all users get $20 off any Major League Baseball purchase of $150 or more in the Gametime app with code FIRSTPITCH. Terms apply. That's code FIRSTPITCH for $20 off from March 25th through April 14th. So hurry up and get those tickets ASAP. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. John Calipari shocked Kentucky by absconding to Arkansas. The Wildcats had been underachieving for a few years now, though. This is a chance for UK to hit the reset button. And the man to do it is clear, as Locked On Kentucky host Lance Daw said on a recent episode.
I would love to have Dan Hurley. I would love to have him for Kentucky. He gives the edge, the grit, the grind, the energy, the desire that Kentucky needs as a program. And also, I think he brings some understanding of what it takes to win a national title in the modern era. Obviously, Hurley has done a phenomenal job both as a recruiter in the high school ranks and in the transfer portal ranks, putting together a very dominant roster for 2 straight seasons. He lost a lot of pieces from last year's squad, and yet UConn is better this season, more dominant in the NCAA tournament, I might argue. So Dan Hurley of the UConn Huskies would be my number one choice. He would be, I think, a lot of people's number one choice.
What if the man to succeed John Calipari at Kentucky isn't a man at all? What about the coach who just won another national title at South Carolina, who is a former professional player and is a beloved figure in basketball, the kind of coach who resonates with everyone they meet? Dawn Staley is probably not going to leave the Gamecocks program. What she's building at South Carolina is truly, truly special. And they just don't lose games there. But Kentucky has deep pockets, and they're not the only school. What if someone was going to give her $50 million? Would that be enough? Maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't. But it would behoove these schools, rather than recycling the same old guys, emphasis usually on old and guys, why not try something new? Why not try this other thing? This established national championship winning thing, this Dawn Staley thing. She strikes me as the kind of person who could go into any house in America and convince the parents and their son that she is the right coach for them. Isn't that the job, regardless of the coach's gender? Her basketball knowledge should not be a question at this point, and shouldn't have been, frankly, ever. Why not? Why not? Even if she's not going to leave, you have to at least call. And finally, the 50th anniversary of Hank Aaron's 715th home run was marked Monday with announcements of a new statue at baseball's Hall of Fame and a new commemorative stamp from the U.S. Postal Service. Baseball's Hall of Fame will unveil a bronze statue of Aaron on May 23rd on the first floor of its museum in Cooperstown, New York. Aaron was elected to the Hall in 1982, a 25-time All-Star. He set a record with 2,297 runs batted in. He continues to hold the records of extra base hits and total bases. A lot of conversations lately about GOATs. That's a GOAT. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports today, who's in the driver's seat to win the NBA title? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.